Hello everyone and welcome along to Season 2 of TGP Has A Podcast. We're doing a slightly different format for this season, where we're going to be taking each week having a chat with a TGP icon over the last 10 years as we look forward to the 10th anniversary of the TGP series. Each week we'll be chatting in depth to various different drivers, members of TGP, commentators, about their time over the last 10 years in the series and what they're looking forward to most coming up in the future. Now we hope you all enjoyed the last series and we'll hope you all enjoy this series coming up as well as we chat to the likes of Softcop, Dan the Man, Ginger Andy and of course Dom Smith, the man who it all started with. Coming up in this episode we have Softcop, arguably the greatest of all time. And I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago about his time over TGP series over the last 5 or 6 years and what he's enjoyed most about his time racing in the series, which has taken him to so much success over multiple disciplines in the championship. I hope you enjoy the episode. I certainly had good fun talking to him. So here he is, the Softcop. So then, Softy, welcome along, our very own record breaker. It's great to have you along for our opening episode of Series 2. So when you look back over your time over TGP, what was it that really made you get into the series? You know, what were you doing before? Where were you?
Well, I mean, prior to TGP, I was in TOC, obviously sadly no longer with us. It's not dead, but, it doesn't exist anymore, sadly. But yeah, a few people, Jack Pearson, Ginger Andy, Phil Bardwell, they came over to TGP, started joining partners and stuff, and then, the rest is history. I ended up becoming sort of part of TGP, back in, 2015?
Yeah, and obviously you had a long and very successful career with us at TGP Series, obviously, as we're going to be looking over during the course of this podcast. But when you look back, I mean, how did you find the switch from leagues like TOC, which obviously were previously longer races? And were you looking forward to the change to the shorter races, or what were your sort of thought process in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean, originally, I think TGP did have planned TGP 100, and obviously 100% races rather than the usual TGP one with 25s. But I think because F1 2015 was broken on release and it didn't really get fixed for quite a few months, that idea was scrapped sadly. And originally I was going to join TGP 1. It was just a bit on the side, as it were. A bit of fun, but I ended up taking it a bit more seriously, and I've been in TGP for a number of seasons now.
And do you miss the sort of 100% races that you were doing before? Was that quite hard to adjust to coming to the 25%? Would you go back to doing 100% again?
Yeah, it would be good to go back to 100s. It's just the time and effort, to do it. I think I do miss the strategy side of things because, it is a lot more, it is very different when it comes to strategy. 25% is just one stop, within, a 2 or 3 lap window, and that's it really. Then it's just down to you and your pace, and there is a lot less strategy involved. But do I miss it? Yes. Am I too fussed, that I'm not doing it? No, not really.
Okay, and what was it that you found most tricky, the switch from 100 to 25% races?
I mean, to be honest, it wasn't really anything that I'd say was more tricky. I think the main thing that took a bit of getting used to was, if you made a mistake or, if you'd spun it, you had a lot less time to then think, okay, now I can get back front. With 100%, you've got the strategy involved. Even with 50%, you've got a strategy. You've got things that you can try and do to, to negate some of the deficit by, whatever happened. But 25%, if you spin, unless there's a safety car, or you're just considerably quicker than everyone else, it is very difficult to, to pull that gap back.
Yeah, and obviously you hit the ground running very much with the 25% races, and in TGP itself, of course, winning the inaugural season that you took part in all the way back. Gosh, when was it now? It must have been season 23. Yeah, it was season 23.
Season 23, yeah.
Back in 2015, late part of 2015. How do you rate that season amongst the seasons you've taken part in? Do you look back and think there were things I could have and should have done differently, or do you think of it as actually that was a season I nailed and it all came together?
I think in terms of looking back on all the seasons I've done in TGP1, or even just in general in TGP with the other leagues as well, it was a good season. There was a lot that I, messed up on. There's a lot of strategy, mistakes that I made. Monaco, I cost myself a win because my L2 decided to break, so that was not very, very easy. Still finished, I think, second, just ahead of you, actually. So I was getting used to the league, let's say. I think I've had far better seasons since. I'd say more dominant seasons, especially sort of last season where it was about 150 points that I ended up winning by. But it was a good base of the competition and who I was going to be racing against in the future.
And do you sort of look back on those early seasons fondly, or because obviously you then went on to win season 25 as well, relatively soon after?
I would say so. I mean, you've always, if you join a league, you've always got to start well. I always say to myself, I wouldn't enjoy it if I went down to TGP2 because it's not got the level of competition. No offense to the drivers in it, of course. They're doing as fast as they can, but I wouldn't enjoy that. So I think it was a good start. I did enjoy it. So I mean, there's not really much more to say. I mean, the competition was, compared to what it is now, I'd say it was a bit easy. There wasn't as many drivers who could win. I think it was mainly me, Wingsman, and Martin at the time in season 23 who were fighting for wins and on a regular basis. So it was a good starting point, we'll say.
Yeah, and obviously your success has been paramount in TGP1. You've gone on to achieve fantastic things: 66 race wins, 62 pole positions, with only James having taken more than you have. Those are incredible numbers. And I've heard you mention before how much the driver for you is the competition side of things. Do the records mean a lot?
For me, they do. For me, a lot of people do compare me to Vettel. I don't like Vettel. I despise him for certain reasons. But for me, it is all about the records. It is about the competition. I want to be the quickest. Usually when I do a bit of practice here and there for the league and stuff, if I know, if I make a mistake or miss an apex by a small margin, I think, okay, I can gain a 10th there or a 10th here. If I don't improve by that 10th, it doesn't satisfy me. So I want to be the best. I want to be the quickest. And, stats don't lie, As you said, 66 wins in TGP, 1. I think I've got, 62 pole positions as well. So, race to quality is pretty even. But, I just enjoy going quick.
Yeah, and you mentioned, as I said there as well, competition being a key thing for you. Is that what sort of got you into league racing to begin with? Is that what was the real driving factor for you to sort of not only get into it, but then to sort of keep striving to improve yourself?
To be fair, initially not really. When I first joined TOC, 2010, when the F1 games first came out, I did, join TOC to do it. It was more just about the fun factor, new F1 games. I hadn't played F1 since the 90s, because there weren't really that many games at the time. So for me, initially it was about the fun. However, as I got into it, started enjoying the games. Obviously, started turning my assists off, which I found more fun than having them on. I then started, getting that competitive streak, as you get older as well. So for me, initially it was just about the fun, but as I've got older, it's then, grown into that competition, grown into wanting to be the best and just wanting to go faster and faster.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously TSC being a key factor, sort of getting you started with this sort of racing and trying to sort of excel yourself. And obviously you did that with eventually sort of upgrading your personal equipment, shall we say, and a move to the wheel, which has brought you a serious amount of success. How did you find the sort of change over there and putting in the man hours to sort of get to the level where you knew you could be competitive?
It took a bit of time. A lot of people may or may not realise, but from 2015 to I think partway through, the 2017 game, I was on a pad the entire time. So, I was used to it. I'd never known anything different. But then come, I think whichever season it was, where the season that Odems won, I got a wheel for the first time. It did take a long time to get used to, but I thought to myself, well, I'm going to sacrifice the season of TGP just to purely get used to my wheel, and come halfway through, I was finishing, I think for the first half of the season I finished in 5th, 6th, 7th, so not really where, I expect myself to be. But then come the end of the season, I was sort of back on my pad pace, and, again, fighting for podiums and wins on a regular basis. And then, sort of rest is history. I'm now, won a good amount more titles sort of since then. So, there's different things. There's advantages with a wheel. There's wheel advantages, smoothness and things like that. Pad advantages, better traction, especially in the wet. It's just easier, on the brakes and things like that. But, I wouldn't go back on a pad. If I had to go back on a pad, I'd probably just not do it. But yeah, it took a while to get used to, but, I'm glad I made the switch.
And you mentioned Odems there. I mean, you've come up against some very quick drivers so far in your career in TGP1. Odems and Wingsman you mentioned there as well, Martin Diver. What's been one of your favourite rivals to compete against so far, and ones that you've enjoyed having a battle with, and ones that you actually think are probably one of your closest rivals as well?
For me personally, I think they've all the people that I've been fighting for the title, even just wins rather than titles as well, they've all got something different. Matt Tibos, for example, he's fast and he's consistent. For me personally, he's probably the person I enjoy fighting for titles the most. I think he's been in since F1 2017 in TGP as well. So it's been a fair few seasons. Obviously, me joining and then leaving due to work commitments. So it's been the best because he's consistently up there. What you're getting when you're fighting him. He's not going to try very silly moves. Don't get me wrong, everyone tries the odd move here that maybe doesn't work out. That's racing. But for the most part, what you're getting with him. He's always fast and consistent. He is in multiple leagues, so the amount of hours he puts into the game, he's going to be at the top of his game. So it's more enjoyable being able to fight him and beat him.
Do you think that he's been your toughest challenger so far?
They've all been tough in ways, but I'd say just the level of pace he's had over consecutive games, I would probably say he is probably the toughest opponent to beat, purely because, again, he is in multiple leagues. He's always on the pace, whether it is quali, race, wet weather, dry weather, so on. So for me, I think he has been the hardest and most satisfying to beat.
Now, very few people have actually beaten you to titles in your career. How was it when Odems took the crown over you? And I know that you said you were getting used to your wheel that season, so you were sort of in your mind felt that was going to be a sacrificial season. But how was it knowing that someone was being very fast and doing very well, and you at that time weren't able to compete with it? Was that difficult?
Not really, because I know sort of in myself that I've got the pace. I think the last week of that season when Odems did win the title, he used ABS. A lot of people know ABS, a pet peeve of mine. If you're fast and you use it. Oh, I know. I always mention it, but everyone knows that ABS, it is a pet peeve. People who use it to be fast when they don't need to, it annoys me. I'm not going to go further into it. But it didn't really annoy me that he beat me because, again, I knew that it was going to be a struggle getting used to my wheel. If I was on a pad, would I have won? I'm not going to say I would have. It would have been close, I'm sure. A lot closer than it was. But, in the end, it was something that I knew, come the start of the season, if I can get a few wins, it would be a success. So I was thinking more the long game rather than the short term of that season.
Yeah, and that's something which obviously has brought you success. Obviously with the 5 titles in total, 3 coming, if I'm right, with a wheel, and 2 coming with a pad. And the most recent season we've run, of course, in TGP1, you won by 150 points, if my memory serves me right,
yep.
And just missed out on a constructors title. How does that season rank in your mind in terms of the best seasons that you've had?
I think it is the most dominant I've been. I think every time I've won a season prior, I think it tends to be around 100 points that I always win them by. But I think it was one of the best purely because I knew at the start of the season, I knew it was going to be a difficult season. I had Matt Tibos, I had Corey as well. There was a lot of drivers who, before the start of the season when the game first came out, looked to be very quick. Jack Hickey as well. So I think just in terms of the level of competitiveness and winning by such a big margin, for me, I think it is my most favourite TGP1 title, of course, and potentially my best ever. Even if I do race in future, so I think it is probably my most favourite.
And you mentioned Corey there as well. You had some rather entertaining battles with him on track, shall we say, last season, where the action was very close. And obviously that fantastic race in Spa that we had, where there was the three of you, the two of you, and Matt Tibos included, of course, going for the win, and it all sort of coming together on the last lap. But that wasn't the only time that you and Corey had a run in that season in Silverstone as well. Looking back on those incidents, would you have handled them differently with hindsight?
Hindsight is always a wonderful thing. I think with Corey, he's a great guy. In terms of great driver. He's very fast. Clearly, him and Matt Tibos, being in multiple leagues as I mentioned earlier, it's hard to beat them. It's as simple as that, really. But the difference, I think, between Matt Tibos and Corey is they've both got a very good amount of pace. Matt Tibos, you know what you're getting. Corey, as Silverstone and Spa, when he's under pressure, he does crack very easily in terms of not really using his head. I think stewards, I'll say this, stewards on both occasions did decide that it was a race incident. Again, I'm going to say differently, of course, but, in hindsight, would I have done it different? Probably not. I think I'd have probably gone for it a bit earlier. I think in Spa and Silverstone, I knew that I wasn't going to pull away. He had my DRS. I was just saving my ERS. I let him past on both occasions, because I thought I'm not going to, I'm going to save my ERS, attack on the last lap. In both cases, I think if we hadn't made contact, I think Silverstone, I was up the inside and he still aimed for the apex. Same with Spa at No Name. For me, it's easy saying you do something different, but I think the only thing I'll do differently next time is be as aggressive as him and settle it elsewhere other than the track.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, you mentioned a couple of times actually, the fact that you're just the one league man. How do you think that makes you approach the races? Do you think you approach it differently to others who are in multiple leagues? What do you think is a benefit to you only being in the one league and focusing your energy on that?
I think there's benefits and there's negatives. I think Matt Tibos, from what I know, I think he's in about 4 to 5 different leagues. I think they're all doing 50% races. I think Corey's in about 2 or 3 different leagues as well. So, the advantages for me is I'm focused on one league. I'm focused on 2 tracks a week, whereas the others maybe have again. I think Matt Tibos being in 5 leagues. 5 out of 7 days. That's a lot of time. 50% races, it's about 20 to 25 laps per race, not including qualifying. So, they may not have to do as much practice. They may not, let's say, focus on TGP as much to do the practice. But the fact that they get so much experience from doing those races, it just means that they don't then have to do the practice because they've done the circuit so many times in potentially different conditions. They're already at the top of their game. Whereas for me, being one league, I don't have as much experience because I'm not consistently doing that track for weeks and weeks and weeks, prior to it. So there is advantages. For me, my advantage, I can focus on 2 circuits, don't have to worry about any other league that I'm in, nice and easy. But the downside is, they've got far more experience with ERS management, especially in a 50% race. They've got overall more experience. So, I'm not going to say which is better. If they want to race in multiple leagues, fair play on them. If they enjoy the game, by all means. But it does mean that, a lot of people do question why I do a lot of practice. It's that reason. I have to do the practice to keep up. If I don't do the practice, I'm going to be finishing 3rd behind them, which is, again, not what I'm aiming to do.
And there's a lot of people who like to point out, shall we perhaps say, that you enjoy practice a little bit more than others, or sweating, as I think it's been commonly referred to as. What do you sort of think when people do start referring to you and saying that you do a lot of sweat before a race? Does that frustrate you, or do you think, well, it's perfectly the same as other drivers being in 3 or 4 different leagues, so I don't really know what the difference is?
Spot on. You're exactly spot on. I think, does it bother me? I think it's been said so much that it doesn't bother me too much anymore. It does bother me a bit because, as you said there's no difference. If you're in five different multiple different leagues, and let's say, out of, somehow that all 5 of your leagues are at one circuit, which TGP are also doing, which I do know for a few of them, it has happened, sort of last season. There is no difference. If you're in 5 different leagues, you're doing 20 laps, let's say at Spa, for example, you do it 5 times, you're looking at about 100 laps, give or take, of that circuit. Whereas for me, I do maybe a few 25%, just see what the tyre wear is like. You do about 4 laps in qualifying. Obviously, I've got to keep up with them. So the way I see it is, if other people that you're fighting are playing the game constantly in other leagues, and I'm doing a bit of sweat, the way I see it, there's nothing wrong with that, because again, I've got to keep up with them because they've got that much experience with the game as well as the circuits. But you've got to sweat to be good. There's no other way around it. Your skill's not going to get you anywhere unless you know what the circuit is and what the strategies are.
And how have you been able to perfect that over the years and over the seasons you've done there? Because obviously you can sweat as much as you like, but if you're not getting anything out of it, there's not really much point of doing it. So how have you been able to get it to a point now where you can do the practice as effectively as possible, ensuring that you are finding as much time as you can in that short window of practice that you're doing?
I mean, there's not really, that's a difficult question that I probably will never be able to really answer. I think, each person's different. Some people might do 1,000 laps of a circuit. I may do 10, and they're going to be a second off me. It's each person, each driver, it's different. For me personally, I think, again, a lot of it does come down to the enjoyment of going fast, wanting to perfect a lap. I think in Monza last season of TGP1, in practice I was doing 17.9s, 18.0 consistently lap after lap. It came to the session and I did an 18.4 and I qualified third. So I was thinking, I wasn't too bothered that I was starting third. It was more the fact that I was, 0.4, half a second off my best. So for me, it is just using my time wisely. If I'm on a lap, every single lap, a lot of people notice in TGP, for the first run I'll always start on the mediums and then go on soft, just so I can get an iron of grip level. So nothing comes out the ordinary. I've not wasted a set of tyres. So for me, I can't really answer for myself, but I just do the practice as quick as I can, and if it's good enough, it's good enough. If not, then so be it.
And is that something that you do to sort of, I guess, get your iron, as you said, but you can sort of build up to each lap then? Every lap, you've got to push a little bit more, or rather than just sort of going straight out there and getting a quick lap in?
It is a bit, yeah. I mean, a few people say it's just to, show off and things like that, which is not the case at all. It is purely a fact of I can get a build-up lap, I can still use as many, and it gives me that strategy option. If I do a good lap on the mediums, depending on what everyone else does, at least it gives me that option of thinking, right, well, if I want to, I can start on the medium, so it keeps those options open. Realistically, because how competitive it is in TGP, I don't think I started on the mediums once last season because it was so close, and it's too much of a risk starting in the midfield. But it is purely a base of first lap on the mediums, see what the grip level's like, see if there's any issues that I notice, and then I can save all my sets of softs, for the quickest. The quickest of laps, and it's as simple as that.
Well, there we go. And looking back on the TGP1 side of things, what's been the race or the season that you enjoyed the most?
Season I've enjoyed the most. I think it was last season because the competition was so strong. It was hard to win. The races I did, and I think I managed to win. What was it? Just over half, half of the races, give or take. So, I'd say the most enjoyable and the hardest season was last.
Okay, very good. Now, it's not just TGP1 and Formula One that you've been successful within. You've had incredible run across multiple different disciplines. across the TGP series. Let's take a look back at the Project Cars side of things. Two-timer champion there in the sort of latter stages of the series, particularly on sort of Project Cars 2. Then, how do you think that your time in that stacked up against some other drivers? Obviously, Owen being the most successful in that series there, but how do you think that you performed over the seasons that you did there, and what would you say is the best season for you personally?
I think, I mean, I think I only did like three, I think it was actually two and a half seasons in total out of all the, I think, 10 seasons that we did in cars. But, the first season, I think I did half the season. It was me, I think it was Jean and Alex who were fighting for the wins at that point. And then I think F1 2015 came out, so I couldn't be bothered with it, so I left halfway through as it sort of started getting juicy. But I think the two sort of key seasons was I think it was season 8, me and Jack fighting for the title, which I won by just 1 point. Very interesting season. I think that was the first season I was on my wheel on Project Cars as well, so it was very enjoyable. I think the best game for wheel users, that is for sure. I made a lot of mistakes that season, definitely. I think I only got 3 wins in the end, which should have been more, but I think I kept spinning from the lead about 3 times as well, which was never good. But then I think the best season, the most enjoyable season, was the one where I beat Owen to the top, because arguably Owen on 36 race wins, second place 25, me on third on 15. And Owen's got 2 titles. I've got Owen's got 3 titles. I've got 2, should I say? Arguably, he is the benchmark. So when I beat Jack in season 8, people did say, "Oh well, it's all good beating Jack, but you've still not beat the greatest." And then season 10 came along, the final season, and I ended up beating Owen, and I missed a week of racing. So for me personally, I say season 10 was the most fun in the touring cars, and the most challenging.
Well, you like to make it difficult for yourself in that respect, don't you? You won season 8 by a single point to Jack, and season 10 to Owen by 4 points. Does that make you look back at it more, more fondly when considering how you won those, or do you sort of think I should have and could have won it by more if I didn't make as many mistakes, or how do you look back on them?
I mean, it's all ifs and buts, to be honest. I could have won by more. Yeah, absolutely. I could have won my ball, but I could have lost it by a few more points. Things like that. It's always ifs and buts. Just people always say, in F1, if Schumacher hadn't done this or this, he would have lost more titles, won more titles. It's all ifs and buts, to be honest. But I think the closer the championship, it is more enjoyable when you look back on it, because then you can think, well, hang on a minute. My consistency and my pace throughout that season, only won by 1 and 4 points in both those seasons. It does make it more nicer come the end, because that you've had to fight all along, and a single extra mistake here or there, and it would have been a very different story. But at the same time, winning by a TGP won last season 150 points, it's also great, because then you can say, right, I've been the best driver, the clear favourite, and I've destroyed the field. But there's benefits to each, and how much you enjoy them.
And also in that season 10 as well, you and Owen should particularly be mentioned. It was only you two and one other who actually won races that season. Such was the dominance. And within that, you set 2 league records as well. The most consecutive race wins with 6, and the most race wins in a season with 10. That's that's 2 quite big statistics to take there in a game where you arguably weren't the best driver for the series.
Yeah, I mean, you can only work with what you've got. At that point in time, I think actually Owen did, especially in season 10, he did a few videos sort of as hot laps, and I got a few tricks off those videos, which allowed me to start the season quicker than I probably would have otherwise. Which, again, given the only the 4 point gap with me missing a week, that could have very easily turned the tide if he hadn't done that. But season 10, it was difficult. Owen was, I'd say, the favourite. Again, he's got the most titles and the most wins, as well as poles out of anyone. He's actually got 51 poles, where the second person has got 21. So I think that says it all. But you can only beat what's in front of you.
And do you wish that we'd done another one of Project Cars? Do you think you would have taken a third title had there been another season?
Oof, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, it's all well and good. Different cars may suit different people. I'd like to think that I would have walked away with it, but you can't say that. It never happened. I can't say whether I might have finished fifth, sixth, seventh. I mean, I think both of the times that I won the title, I went into the season because I didn't do the previous seasons prior to the season 7 and then season 9. I didn't do. I was going into it not really expecting anything, and I came away with it with 2 titles.
And when you think back to those seasons that you did, as you said, limited seasons that you did do, what's your favourite race? It doesn't necessarily have to be one that you won, but what's one that you look back and think, I did particularly well there?
I think there's not really anyone that stands out that I think, I won that one. It was the best race I've ever done. Although I think the most fun was, I think it was season 8 at Long Beach. I think it was the feature race. Pulled out a bit of a gap on lap 1, going into the final sector. It was wet, full wet conditions, so Project Cars with the puddles is very dangerous. Hit a puddle, spun it, and had to sit there while the whole field went past so I could rejoin. And then me, Owen, and Phil were neck and neck. The entire race after that, and I think that was Luca's first. I think I don't know if he's won more than
first
that,
and only win that one. Yeah,
first and only win there. Yeah, so I think we all finished second, third, and fourth. Me, Phil, and Owen in that race. So that was probably my most fun and memorable, purely because the puddles were causing chaos. You hit them wrong and off you go. And the fact that it was neck and neck between me and 2 other drivers was pretty exciting.
Well, there's your overview of your Project Cars done, and let's move to something which I think arguably you were probably at your most dominant in when TGP made the decision to go back onto the dirt games and take on WRC once more, and you came into season 4 of your first full season, and the statistics and the tables won't show it, but absolutely blitzed it.
Yeah, I mean, with dirt rally and just rally games in general, I wasn't really a rally fan. Even to this day, I've never actually really watched a rally event since I was very young. But prior to Dirt Rally 2.0, I would have never have got it if it wasn't for it being a free PS Plus game. So thank you, PlayStation, for that. But prior to that, I think the last rally game I played was Callum Kirkham on the PS1. But I think when I went into the season, the fact that I'd never really done rally, properly, let's say, I wasn't really, again, like Project Cars, I wasn't expecting much. And then, I think that the first rally at Poland, I think it was about 1 minute 45 that I ended up winning by, which I still think is the biggest margin in TGP Dirt. And so far, I think so. I think after that, I think it became clear that I think I've got a very good chance of a title. And I mean, I only did two seasons in dirt, and I think, I'm on 56 stage wins, 9 rally wins. I did 2 seasons, while everyone else is, I think, are on their sort of 4th, 5th season at this point. So and the stage wins 56, second place is on 38. So I think that really says it all at how, I don't know, to sound arrogant, dominant I was at that stage.
And why were you so good?
Don't get me wrong, practice. I think dirt was the one where I probably got the most stick for doing a bit of practice. But I'll say this: I limited myself to 2 runs through the full rally. A lot of people do more than did more sweat than me, but they won't admit it. Some people did less than me, but people thought it was not the rally way, because that's not what real rally drivers do. But end of the day, it was within the rules at that time. I just made sure I made the most of what I had, and nothing was stopping other people from doing the exact same.
And were you disappointed when the rules and regulations changed for TGP Dirt, which to a certain degree was aimed at trying to restrict you and your domination of the league, which ultimately led to you not taking part? Did that frustrate you?
I think at the time it in the nicest way, it absolutely infuriated me, because the fact that in every sport, someone dominates, the rules get brought in to stop that. That I've got no issue with that whatsoever. It's just a natural part of sport. No one wants to watch one person just have no competition. It's as simple as that. And if I was everyone else and you're thinking, hang on a minute, what's the point of me doing the league or doing a race or doing a rally if I know for a fact that this person's going to win by a few minutes? I've got no issue with that. The issue that I had, I'm not going to go into too much detail, was, I asked for clarification on the rules. Obviously, it was a rule of, right, sweating for me was banned. I wanted a clarification if that was purely just a ban for me, and it wasn't just sweat, it was playing the game at all. Some people know I like to go for trophies and stuff, and I was trying to get platinum at the time, so bit of annoyance there. But I wanted clarification if it was just myself who was banned from playing the game and sweating, or it was other people as well. It was never made absolutely clear. I asked for clarification, on that, and it was never made clear. So, I didn't take part, and I've never returned since.
And do you wish that you could come back?
It's all well and good saying I think as Jack used to say when I first joined TGP from TOC, we always said, don't let Softy in, he'd ruin the league. To be honest, I think Dirt, I did sort of ruin it. I think, the stats don't lie. I think Roy, this season, is now on the most rally wins of 12, while I'm in second on 9. But, I'm still good. I've not really played Dirt Rally that much since. I actually, getting used to new pedals at the moment, and I went 3 seconds quicker at Poland. So clearly, I like that. I like that rally. Would I come back? Probably not at this stage. I think it's the last season of TGP Dirt anyway, so with one rally remaining. So maybe in future, yes, depending if work permits and the rules, of course. But I think if I got the offer to return at this moment, I'd probably say no.
It's very interesting, and we I think that we take it granted a little bit when people are dominating, because at the same time it's very frustrating and boring for those also competing who don't have a chance, and those who are also watching it and just seeing the same results all the time. But for you, living it and being that dominant figure, do you feel that a certain pressure's upon you going into each rally, each event? Do you suddenly feel like there's an expectation for you to win and everyone's just looking for that upset?
I think, when I was in Dirt Rally, I didn't really pay too much attention to what, I knew that I had the pace at each rally. Right, I knew before I went into it, right, I'm probably going to be first, second, if I don't make mistakes. I never took for granted my pace, though. I always thought, well, I'm not going to rest on my laurels and think, what, I'm not going to do any practice. I'm just going to, wing it, and I know I'm going to do well. There was always that slight pressure. It was a different type of pressure because it's more a pressure on yourself to not make mistakes rather than you're battling with someone on a racetrack, for example. So, it's difficult, but for me, I think that the most pressure just came from yourself and knowing, okay, this rally, I've got the confidence of doing well. I'm just going to get on with it. And again, whatever happens. Just don't make mistakes.
Well, it's an interesting comment that you say there. Well, I think we've almost pretty much covered everything. I'd like to go through, as we're going to be doing with everyone during this series, a few sort of quick-fire questions. So, first one, can you beat the records for TGP1 titles?
Skill-wise, yes. Work commitments may prevent that, so I know I can do it, but whether my work allows me to is another story.
Can you equal your hero Schumacher's record of 91 wins in TGP1?
Ooh, it's a lot. I'm only on 66 at the moment. It's a good while yet. I mean, if I can race, when work permits, I will, do my absolute best. I know that, again, in my skill I can race. So maybe in a few years, maybe if work allows me to. The answer to that is on skill, yes. Again, work commitments, maybe another story.
Favourite track?
Bahrain.
Really?
I love Bahrain. It's got all sorts of corners. It's difficult. It's a night race. It's just an all-round nice circuit to drive.
And is that just in terms? And that's one lap racing terms, or is that in over a race? That's the favourite.
Both, both qualifying, full race distance. It's just a great circuit. There's always battles there. It's a nice circuit to drive in, and it can be challenging if you sort of don't take it with enough caution.
Least favourite track?
Monaco. I always do very well around there. I always win, but I absolutely despise the place, and it would not bother me if it came off the calendar.
That's the Phil Bardrell Nürburgring syndrome, it seems, going on there. Favourite driver to race against?
Matt Tibos.
Least favourite driver to race against?
Unfortunately, I'd have to say Corey, purely down to the fact that sometimes he does make mistakes and judgment calls that, as we saw last season, did sort of cost me two wins, I'd say. So, unfortunately, Corey just jammed to his racing haircut.
There you go, Corey. If you're listening to this, you've got in his head for next season. All right, just send one up the inside, and he's clearly going to back out of it.
As I said earlier, there, we might have to decide it in the sewage room if come the end of the race. I won't be that forgiving next time.
What game would you like to see TGP take a season in the future?
Oh, I would like to see MotoGP games, not because I'm very, very good on them, just because it's something slightly different.
Sure?
Usually whenever the esports events come around, I always finish in the usually in the top 50 for each one. So I'd say I'm decent, but. Yeah, I'd like to see MotoGP. It's something a bit different. It's just whether we can get the numbers. Me and Phil have been trying to get a MotoGP league going for I think about 2-3 years, and sadly it's just the numbers that we don't get to make it go ahead.
So could we have Phil Bardwell as a TGP GP champion? As he can clearly beat you, can he?
I mean, well, I don't know about that. I mean, you never know, to be honest. But all I'll say is you never know. Each game's different, so. It's always a possibility.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that day could come where we see TGP take on MotoGP and we give Softy another game to be dominant at. Well, Softy, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure as always to have a chat with you. We've got a new game coming up for TGP1 next. What do you think your chances are? Can you equal James's record before we think about all important 7th title to equal your hero? Can you equal James's?
Well, in terms of skill, yes. Again, a different game is different. I think I pride myself on, the fact that on every F1 game I've been quick. I've never sort of really dropped off the pace like some TGP champions. So I would say the answer. I don't see why the answer can't be a yes.
Brilliant stuff. Well, to find out more about Softy's adventures in life and in various racing games you've got coming up, be sure to go follow him on Twitter at the Softcop, and your YouTube's the same, isn't it? As well, YouTube the Softcop. It is,
yeah. And actually, all my dirt rally runs were on there as well as a few highlights from TGP1 and also TGP cars from my championship winning days, let's say.
Good stuff. Well, Softy, as ever, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Fingers crossed.
So there you have it, episode 1 of season 2 of TGP Has a Podcast. I hope you enjoyed my chat with the Soft Cop and his adventures over the history of TGP series. Next week, we're chatting to legendary commentator Ginger Andy and about his time joining commentary, his successes he's found, and what he enjoys most in the TGP series. For now, goodbye.